Hey there, true believers, and welcome back to Sitetoastonish. With a lot of hype around the new Ben 10 comic by Dynamite, also known as Absolute Ben 10, which the fans have been calling it recently, I thought I'd get ahead on trying to design some of the characters. Now, I'm doing all of this before the first issue comes out on May 6th, but I was really interested in the slightly grittier take that they're taking for this comic. A lot of the shots that we've gotten seem to be hinting towards an extremely dark version of this character, and I don't mean like the SpongeBob fucking Rainbow Ride gif. I mean like an actual seriously dark take on Ben 10 that shows the effects of the Omnitrix on Ben and why the government and Vilgax would really want to get this weapon. Now, we know that the Omnitrix is a very powerful thing, but what other creatures on Earth would want to get their hands on the Omnitrix? There's this bear in the first issue that seems to be a reference to the reboot's villain, this guy. But there are some villains that I wanted to see how they would look in this comic. Now, I can't draw in the art style of Joe Casey, neither can I do it in any of the other wonderful artists who have worked on this comic. So this is in my art style, which granted is a lot more cartoony than anything seen in the Dynamite comics. You'll have to forgive me on that one. But I really wanted to see if I could put pen to paper and sort of create what I would like to see in a redesign for these characters. So I've got a few villains here that I'd like to run down, specifically 4 villains that I'd like to run down, and I really want to show you what my concepts for them are, also walking you through them as I'm giving you a little speed draw on them. So without further ado, let's get into pre-designing some Absolute Ben 10 villains. The first villain I've got is pretty obvious from what I've got on my canvas, and that's Animo. I want to see Absolute Animo. Now, Animo is a villain that appears quite a lot in classic Ben 10 and even more later on, but he's a villain that's always stuck out to me as one of the major Ben 10 antagonists alongside Vilgax, because this guy hates Ben Tennyson as much as I hate Spider-Man 2's storytelling. Because nothing but rent-free hatred runs through Animo's head the fucking minute he sees that watch. He sees what it can do, he knows it can immediately help him, so I wanted to take it in the direction of how can I push what is shown of Animo in the original even further. Now, I decided to focus on one thing, and that is that Animo is a homeless bum. But for real, Animo has lost pretty much everything by the time he's trying to fight against Ben Tennyson. He's put all of his work into his animal mutation and control helmet, so I kind of wanted to push that angle and sort of, maybe we've met this Animo already after he's gone completely bankrupt. He's lost everything, so everything he's working with is this one prototype that he's got, and then he's banking heavy on it. With this version of Animo taking a lot of cues from what he's seeing online, on conspiracy theory boards, and when he finds out about the Omnitrix, he goes to try and track it down. And this being the first test of his inventions, he mutates some animals to try and take on Benjamin Tennyson, thus leading to him seeing the Omnitrix, thus leading to him wanting to capture it for himself and use its DNA to create even more powerful things to get revenge on those who laughed at him when he was creating his inventions, the ones that led to his downfall of no longer having a home and being a disgraced scientist. Now, that is a storyline extremely close to what Animo has in classic series, and that's because I don't think you need to change Animo's storyline. It's a very perfect storyline until he goes kind of nuts and puts himself in that fucking ape body, but I think classic Animo being presented here could work super well. I just wanted to give him a bit more of a rough and like sort of vagranty look to, you know, what he's presenting in this comic, because I feel like in reality Animo would have lost his house way sooner than what we see in classic Ben 10, because it is fucking filled with animals and a bunch of robotic parts. And I think that seeing Animo craft like stuff from junk would be a really amazing way to show his intellect, whilst also keeping him up there as a threat to Ben 10, because it means that no matter how little his means, the sheer rent-free hatred he has for Benjamin Tennyson will keep him going. But as you can see, the design I settled for keeps the classic goggles and the horned helmet, as well as the chest piece, but I've added some bits to his gloves and sort of given him more of just a dirtier look. I already really like Animo's designs. I've used both Omniverse as a human and also classic Animo's design to base this off of, as I'm not really a fan of anything that appears later on, but those two just kind of work for me. I also kind of like his style in the reboot. which I've not pulled from here, but is pretty close to classic anyway. But yeah, I wanted to keep his long silver mane. I wanted to keep those big eyebrows that he's got in classic, but push them a little bit further. I've made him a little bit younger, I think, in terms of how I've drawn him. But I've kept that sallow, gross skin that he has. I'm pretty happy with how he turned out, and I'd love to see this kind of style of Animo in the comics. I have no doubt that we're gonna see him. Let me know what you guys think down below on this Animo design. The next villain that we have up is Steam Smythe. For Steam Smythe, I thought it was a pretty simple design, very derivative if I'm honest, but it's the only thing that really popped to mind because he already has a pretty solid character design. I took inspiration from Loveless, from Wild Wild West, an old 90s movie starring Will Smith, for his leg pieces, because I thought, what would be interesting is to make more of him a machine than man. It's a very common trope, obviously, but I really wanted to push how much he cares about the steam technology, because it is his whole thing. He rides on airships and such. So I thought, hey, Wild Wild West has a lot of those really interesting design features in there. A lot of it's very steam machinery. So I'm going to pull kind of from there a little bit with his leg design rather than just giving him normal legs. So I did pull from that, and I think it turned out pretty nicely. For his arm, I took an arm off. I removed an arm. So he's now got a multifunctional sort of Mega Man-esque arm with a blaster on the end of it that's a Tesla coil. His hat remained mostly the same. It's a top hat, but instead of having a lens, it has a cog. His face remains mostly the same, except from I've given him an artificial eye for getting really close into those little, intricate bits with the steam work, with him making a lot of small cog-like machines. He's going to have to get really in there, so I gave him an eye that would allow him to do so. And then he has one regular arm. Other than the legs being massively different, the other major design changes that I made is that he now has a furnace within his stomach region, this powering everything around him. I know it's not technically steam, but I don't care, because I thought it would look cool. So he's got that there in the end, which I think, all in all, this design looks pretty okay. I'm happy with it. It's not terrible. I don't think it would, really work in a show, but maybe in a comic form with a little bit more of a serious art style rather than my art style. This could be an intimidating creature. I mean, we have seen what Crab will look like, so I've, envisioned he'd look more like Crab, but with Steam Smythe's body atop that. The next villain that I have redesigned is Hex. Now, Hex's redesign is a little bit more different than the other two. Obviously, Animo's pretty close to regular Animo. Steam Smythe is sort of more out there, whereas Hex is somewhere in the middle, like a DeviantArt fan creation. So for Hex, I just kind of wanted to really reinforce the skeletal design that he goes for. Obviously, I know that I think he's supposed to be voodoo with his magic style in the show, so I didn't want to lean too heavy on that because I don't know too much about voodoo culture, and I didn't want to appropriate anything or fuck up any of that culture and use it in a way that shouldn't be used. So instead I decided to sort of inspire off of a more general monk aesthetic, more like a fantasy monk rather than any specific kind. So I gave him the large baggy trousers that you see in many a depiction, such as Aang from Avatar. And I wanted to sort of take that and maybe, keep this skeleton sort of body shape, because Hex is often shown as being quite buff, but, I kind of preferred when he was super skinny back in Classic before he got all of his power back, and I was like, that's what I want. I want the sort of old man looking Hex. Now, the only thing that I regret not being able to fully put in here is what they do with Omniverse, where they give Hex a bit more black heritage, which I did want to represent. However, I'm not a very good artist in my own opinion, and I'm not very good at drawing people of color. So rather than make something that could be in any way offensive, I decided to stick something that I could do, which is a more skeletal man design. However, in a couple of years' time, perhaps when I'm a much better artist and I've worked more with creating people of colour, I could make more what I want to see, which is a lot closer to his Omniverse design. So instead, I focused heavy on Classic's original design, which is him with a greyer skin tone and with the, makeup on the face. Now, I wasn't thinking about putting the makeup on his face. Initially, as you can see from my drawing there, I did think to give him a skull head, and then I thought, no, I don't want to go Ghost Rider but with magic, so I thought, fuck it, we'll pull it back a little bit, we'll make him a man again. And to be honest with you, I'm quite happy with how it turned out. I traded his robes for some more tattered, like, just stuff covering his body barely. I've put a couple of the runes from the show on both his knees. I think his head turned out okay, a little bit too derivative for my liking, but hey, that's the best I could do with the time I've got. So all in all, with these 3 villains, I'm pretty happy with them. Of course, they could be better, but like I said before, I don't deem myself to be good enough to be able to draw in this comic style, but you know, I wanted to take a crack at how I would like to see these characters if they were sort of a little bit more absolute, as it were. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Is this absolute enough for you, or could I have done better? And tell me where I could have done better. If you want to send me some of your redesigns, if you've done any, send them to me on Twitter at Sitetoastonish. I'd love to look at them. But, you know, do the classic like, subscribe, leave a comment, all that. Thank you very much for watching this video. The Ben 10 comic is something I'm really excited for. However, I'm off on a big old trip to Japan, so I won't be really able to cover that as it comes out. But as soon as I am back, boy, you better fucking sit down and lock in, because I'll be covering the Ben 10 comic. Thank you guys so much for watching. Bye-bye.